Why unicorns are scary. I never believed in unicorns. Not in the fairy tale sense. Not in the glowing, gentle, rainbows and magic kind of way. I believed in extinct species, in lost evolutionary branches, in creatures hiding in the deepest corners of the earth where no one dared to look. That's why I was here. That's why we all were. Our expedition had been funded by a private investor, someone rich, powerful, and anonymous. The only thing they cared about was proof. Unicorns had been whispered about for centuries, buried in folklore, dismissed as myths. But there were reports, strange sightings, blurry photos, carcasses found with wounds too precise to be natural. Something was out here, and we were going to find it. We were deep in the Carpathian Mountains, where the fog clung to the trees like a second skin, where the nights stretched longer than they should. Our team was small, 6 people, all professionals. Dr. Michael Greaves, biologist, our expert on rare and undocumented species. Rachel Voss, cryptozoologist, the only one who actually believed unicorns existed before we got here. Jonas Reed, tracker, ex-military, ex-poacher, a man who could read the land like a book. Tariq Shah, cameraman. If we found something, the world needed to see it. Lucas Parrish, security, a man with too many scars and too few words. And me, Jack Calloway, former wildlife researcher, turned survivalist, turned expedition leader. We weren't here for a fairy tale. We were here to hunt a legend. The first sign that something was wrong came on our second night. We had set up camp near a clearing, just outside a stretch of old-growth forest, where the trees were gnarled and twisted, their bark scarred by deep gouges. Jonas was the first to notice. These aren't claw marks. He traced the deep gashes in the wood, frowning. They're too clean, too straight. Rachel leaned in, running her fingers along the grooves. These were made by something sharp, a blade maybe. We exchanged glances, or a horn. That night, the forest was too quiet. No insects, no birds, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, like the entire forest was holding its breath. Lucas, ever the paranoid one, sat with his rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the tree line. I don't like this. None of us did, because whatever was out there, it was watching us. By the time dawn broke, we knew something was wrong. Jonas had been the first one up, scanning the tree line as he always did, but this time he was stiff, tense, gripping his rifle like it was the only thing keeping him alive. I stepped up beside him, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. You see something? He didn't answer at first, just pointed. At first I didn't get it. Just another part of the dense forest. The fog curling around the roots, patches of deep green moss covering the ground. Then I saw it, blood, not splattered, not smeared, pooled, like something had been killed right there. Rachel and Michael were the first to move in, scanning the area while Jonas covered them with his rifle. Tariq grabbed his camera, staying close, filming as Rachel knelt by the blood. It's fresh, she murmured, still warm. Michael ran a gloved hand through it, his face unreadable. No footprints, no drag marks. He looked up at me. Whatever died here, either it was carried away or it vanished into thin air. I didn't like either option. Lucas scanned the area, muttering, something doesn't feel right. And he was right, because there was no smell of death, no flies, no scavengers, just a deep, metallic scent in the air. Rachel swallowed. I don't think we're the only ones hunting. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Jonas led the way, his movements controlled, precise. Lucas stayed close behind him, his rifle slung low but ready. Rachel and Michael whispered to each other about theories, how a creature could bleed so much and leave no trace. I wasn't thinking about theories. I was thinking about survival. Something was watching us. I could feel it. That primal instinct that sends chills down your spine when you know you're not alone. And then we saw it. A glimpse. Just a flicker through the trees. Tariq barely had time to raise his camera before it was gone. A blur of white. Fast. Impossibly silent. Jonas froze. That wasn't a deer. Rachel was already moving, whispering to Tariq. Did you get it? He checked the footage, shaking his head. Too fast. I saw something. But it was just, he cut himself off, his face pale. What? I asked. He turned the screen toward us. It was blurry, distorted, but the shape was unmistakable. A horse-like creature, low to the ground, muscles coiled like a panther, eyes black as night. And on its forehead, a twisted, jagged horn. Nobody spoke. Michael's voice was the first to break the silence. That's not a unicorn. Jonas tightened his grip on his rifle. It's a killer. And for the first time since we started this mission, I realized we weren't tracking it. It was tracking us. We moved fast, not running. Running gets you killed. But we weren't wasting time anymore. Every step was measured, controlled. low to the ground, rifles up, eyes scanning the trees. Because now, we knew the truth. This wasn't a hunt anymore. It was an ambush waiting to happen. Jonas took point, his movements precise, barely making a sound. Lucas was close behind, his rifle sweeping the tree line, his jaw locked tight. Rachel and Michael stuck together, whispering quietly, still trying to process what we had just seen. Tariq, he was filming, because if we didn't make it out of here, someone had to know what really happened. The forest was thick with fog, curling between the trees like ghostly fingers. The air was too still, too quiet. No wind, no birds, nothing. And that's when Jonas stopped, froze, completely still, hand raised, fist clenched. The universal signal for danger. I followed his gaze, and then I saw it. Not one, three. They stood in the mist, barely visible, not grazing, not moving, just watching. Their white coats were slick, like they had just walked out of a river. Their horns were long, jagged, sharpened to deadly points, but it was their eyes that made my stomach turn. Deep black, no reflection, no soul. Predators, calculating, waiting. Jonas whispered, "They're not running." Rachel's breath was shaky. "They're testing us, sizing us up, the way wolves circle prey before the kill." Nobody spoke, nobody moved. And then, the lead unicorn charged. It was so fast that I barely had time to react. 1 second it was standing still. The next, it was a white blur, tearing through the mist like a missile. Jonas fired first. The gunshot shattered the silence, echoing through the trees. The unicorn jerked mid-charge, but it didn't go down. It didn't even slow. Lucas fired next. A direct hit. A round slammed into its side, blood spraying across the dirt, but the unicorn just kept coming. And then I saw how it moved. Not galloping, not like a horse. It twisted, lunged, adjusted mid-stride, like a big cat. Fluid and deadly. It wasn't just fast. It was smart. "Move," I shouted. We split just as it crashed through the space where we had been standing. Its horn speared a tree trunk, missing Jonas by inches, splintering the wood like it was nothing. It turned on him immediately, snarling. Yes, snarling. Before lunging again, Jonas barely got his rifle up in time. The unicorn slammed into him, knocking him off his feet, its horn carving a deep gash into his shoulder. "Jonas!" Rachel screamed. Lucas fired another shot, this time a headshot. The unicorn dropped, its body twitching, its muscles still spasming even in death. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Tariq exhaled. "Oh, we are so screwed." Because the other two unicorns, they weren't running, they were circling. Jonas was down. The unicorn lay dead beside him, its massive body still twitching, blood pooling beneath it. But we had zero time to process it, because the other two, they were circling. They didn't run, they didn't scream, they just stalked us, slow and deliberate, eyes locked on us like we were already dead. Predators, pack hunters, and we had just killed one of their own. Lucas reloaded, breathing hard. "We need to move, now." Rachel dropped beside Jonas, checking his wound. The gash on his shoulder was deep, but not fatal. He was conscious, gritting his teeth, trying to push himself up. "They're waiting for us to panic," I said, gripping my rifle tighter. "We don't. We stick together, back toward the ridge." It was our best bet. Higher ground, clearer sight lines. If we ran blindly through the trees, they'd run us down in seconds. We started moving, slow, controlled, not turning our backs, not giving them an opening. The unicorns moved with us, their muscles shifting under their slick coats, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Their horns were stained red. I didn't want to know with what. It happened fast. 1 second, we were holding formation, moving carefully, weapons ready. The next, the unicorns attacked. One of them faked left, then lunged right. Lucas fired first, but the damn thing dodged, cutting low, whipping around the trunk of a tree like a ghost. The second unicorn went straight for Rachel and Jonas. Jonas, still half conscious, barely managed to roll out of the way as the horn sliced through the air where his head had been. Rachel screamed, stumbling back, raising her knife. A last resort. I shot first. The bullet slammed into the unicorn's chest, stopping it mid-lunge, but it didn't fall. Instead, it twisted, snapping its head toward me, eyes burning with rage. And then, it screamed. Not a whinny, not a roar, a deep, inhuman shriek that sent chills up my spine. And that's when I realized, it wasn't just calling out in pain. It was calling for more. Tariq cursed under his breath. "Oh, hell no." Lucas grabbed Jonas, slinging his arm over his shoulder. "Move, now." We took off, full sprint. Branches whipped at our faces, our boots slamming into the damp forest floor. Behind us, The unicorns gave chase, not galloping, running, fast, silent, like shadows made of muscle and bone. And somewhere, deeper in the forest, I swear I heard another one answer that scream. We weren't just running from two anymore. The whole pack was coming, and I didn't think we were going to make it out alive. We ran like hell. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and thick underbrush. But we didn't stop, couldn't stop. The unicorns were right behind us, moving with impossible speed, their hooves barely making a sound. I risked a glance back. Bad idea. The unicorn in the lead had locked onto me, its jagged horns slick with blood, its muscular frame rippling as it charged through the trees. Its eyes, black, soulless, focused, held only one thing: predatory hunger. Jonas was barely keeping up, his wounded shoulder slowing him down. Lucas still had him half draped over his arm, practically dragging him. We can't outrun them forever, Rachel gasped, dodging a low-hanging branch. I knew she was right. We needed a plan, a trap, a way to fight back. Ahead, the forest began to slope upward, the ridge. There, I pointed. We get to the top, make our stand. Nobody argued, because at this point, we were out of options. The moment we reached the ridge, we turned to face them, hearts pounding, hands shaking, weapons up. And the unicorns? They didn't stop. They charged. Lucas fired first, a direct shot to the chest. The unicorn barely flinched. Tariq fired next, missed. His hands were shaking. I lined up my shot, waited until the lead unicorn was nearly on top of us, then pulled the trigger. The round hit its leg. This time, it stumbled. Not much, not enough, but enough to throw off its charge, sending it skidding to the side, snarling. The second unicorn was right behind it, adapting, learning. They were smart, too smart. They weren't just attacking us like mindless beasts. They were coordinating. Jonas, barely standing, ripped a flare from his vest and ignited it. For a moment, the bright red light cut through the mist, illuminating the unicorns in full detail. Their coats weren't white. They were covered in scars, in ancient wounds, in thick, armored hide that shimmered like glass. Creatures built for war, Rachel whispered, voice trembling. These things were never meant to be myths. No, they were meant to be monsters. And now, we were trapped with them. The unicorns didn't hesitate. They came at us like ghosts through the fog, their bodies low and fast, their horns gleaming in the dawn light. They weren't just attacking, they were coordinating, adjusting, like they knew how to break our formation. Lucas fired first, point blank to the chest. The lead unicorn barely flinched before twisting out of the way. Rachel's knife sliced through the air, but the second unicorn dodged, moving like a big cat instead of a horse. Jonas, still half conscious, struggled to lift his rifle. His wound had slowed him down, made him weak, but his eyes were sharp. He saw what I saw. They weren't just attacking, they were studying us. The first unicorn lunged at Rachel, its horn slicing through the air, but I was faster. I fired 2 rounds, straight into its ribs. It stumbled, but it didn't go down. Instead, it let out a low guttural sound, something between a growl and a hiss. Then, without warning, it screamed. Not in pain, in warning, calling for more. We need to end this now, I shouted, gripping my rifle tight. Jonas ripped a flare from his vest, igniting it. The bright red light cast eerie shadows across the creatures, making their scarred, battle-worn bodies shimmer in the mist. For the first time, I saw it. A weak spot, just below the horn, where the bone met the skull. A thinner plate, a kill shot. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed Rachel's knife off the ground, dodged the next charge, and as the unicorn barreled past me, I drove the blade straight into its weak point. The unicorn stiffened mid-stride, then collapsed. The second unicorn let out a piercing cry, a warning, a command. Then, without another sound, it turned and vanished into the mist, gone, just like that. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Our breath was ragged, heavy, mixing with the morning air. Tariq lowered his camera, his hands shaking. Hell no, Jonas groaned, pressing his hand to his shoulder. You said it, man. Rachel looked at me, still gripping her knife like it was the only thing keeping her alive. That was the last one, right? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure. We walked out of that forest, half dead, covered in blood, barely able to stand. We had survived. We had won, but we had nothing to show for it, because Tariq's camera, broken, somewhere in the chaos. Whether it was the chase, the fall, or when he hit the ground dodging an attack, the camera had smashed against the rocks. The lens was cracked. The screen was dead. The footage, gone. Nobody believed us. Not the media. Not the scientific community. Not anyone. They called us liars, conspiracy theorists, Frauds. They laughed when we told them what we found. Unicorns? Apex predators? Pack hunters? Ridiculous. We had no proof. Nothing but scars, trauma, and memories we could never erase. Unicorns are terrifying monsters. They sent us in thinking this was a containment mission. Eliminate the threat, secure the area, retrieve biological samples. That was the official briefing. What they didn't tell us, what they probably knew but refused to say, was that we weren't dealing with animals. We were stepping into the territory of predators. Our chopper cut through the night sky, slicing toward the island's thick canopy. Black Ridge Island, that's what they called it. But there was nothing on any map, no records, no history. Just an isolated patch of land in the Pacific, where too many ships had disappeared. Too many distress signals had been lost to static. Our mission was simple: get in, assess the threat, neutralize anything hostile, and secure a breeding ground. The team was solid, ex-military, hardened mercs, and one scientist, me, Dr. Sam Carter, field biologist, specializing in cryptid life forms. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to understand what we were dealing with. But deep down, I already knew. The briefings, the reports, they all pointed to one thing: unicorns. Not the storybook kind, not the gentle, glowing fairy tale nonsense. No, these things were monsters. The first sign of trouble came as we dropped altitude. The jungle below was wrong, too still, too perfect. A landscape that should have been crawling with life was completely silent. No birds, no insects, just a dead, waiting hush. Something's not right, our pilot muttered. Then something hit us. A streak of white, a blur faster than my eyes could track. The windshield exploded inward. The pilot let out a gurgling scream as a horn punched through his chest. Blood spraying across the cockpit. I barely had time to register the horror before the chopper lurched, alarms blaring. We were going down. The crash should have killed us. It didn't. I woke up half buried in wreckage, my ears ringing, blood in my mouth. The jungle loomed around us, dark and unnatural, the trees like towering prison bars. The silence remained. 4 of us survived the impact. Morales, ex-Delta Force, built like a tank. Foster, demolitions expert, already pulling himself out of the wreck with a pistol drawn. Reeves, the team sniper, bleeding from a head wound but still breathing. And me, the others, dead before they even knew what hit them. "We need to move," Morales said, yanking me to my feet. His voice was low, tense. He felt it too. We weren't alone. Then we saw it. 20 feet away, standing at the edge of the trees, was a unicorn. Not a mythical creature, not some harmless beast of legend. A killer. Its body was sleek, too perfect, its muscles shifting beneath a hide that almost seemed to glow in the moonlight. But the eyes, black, bottomless pits of intelligence and hunger. They locked onto us, studying, calculating. Its horn wasn't a delicate spiral. It was a weapon, jagged, obsidian-like, still dripping with the pilot's blood. And then it did something I will never forget. It smiled. Not an animal expression, not instinct. A smile, like it knew something we didn't. And that's when the others stepped out of the trees. 4 more unicorns, silent, waiting, watching. This wasn't a hunt. This was an execution. Morales raised his rifle. Run, we ran. No hesitation, no second guessing. We ran like hell. The jungle was thick, roots and vines clawing at our boots. But we didn't stop. The unicorns didn't chase us the way a normal predator would. No snarling, no wild pursuit. They stalked, moving just out of sight, shifting between the trees like ghosts, letting us know they were there. "They're playing with us," Foster panted, gripping his side as we tore through the undergrowth. "I know," Morales growled. He had his rifle up, scanning the shadows, but he wasn't firing, because there was nothing to shoot at. The jungle trapped us. The deeper we ran, the denser it became. The air thick with something I couldn't name. Not just humidity, not just heat, something else. Something that made my thoughts fuzzy, my muscles slow, a weight pressing against my skull. Then Reeves stopped dead. We nearly crashed into him. "What the hell are you doing?" Morales hissed. Reeves didn't answer. He was staring ahead, eyes glassy, unfocused. That's when I heard it, a voice. No, a melody. A sound so sickeningly beautiful that it made my heart ache. My mind screamed danger, but my body wanted to move toward it. Like a siren's call, but worse. Because it wasn't coming from outside me, it was in my head. Foster's breathing slowed. His grip on his gun loosened. I forced myself to look past Reeves, to see what he was seeing. And I did. A unicorn stood in a small clearing ahead, bathed in silver moonlight, its body glowing faintly, almost angelic. It wasn't snarling, wasn't attacking. It just stood there, staring at us with those black, endless eyes. Reeves took a step forward, then another. I grabbed him. Reeves, don't. He didn't hear me. Or maybe he did, but it didn't matter. The unicorn's lips curled. Not a smile, a smirk, and then it vanished. Not into the jungle, not into the shadows. It just wasn't there anymore. Reeves gasped, stumbling back. His hands flew to his ears, his face twisting in pain. Then his nose started bleeding, and then his eyes. Oh God, Foster whispered. Reeves screamed. His entire body seized, shaking violently as if something was tearing him apart from the inside. Then, crack, his skull split. No weapon, no attack, just pressure. His body hit the ground, twitching before going completely still. Morales swore under his breath, dragging me backward as Foster stood frozen in place. Horror painted across his face. Move, Morales growled. Now. I wanted to run, but my mind had already shattered around one horrible truth. The unicorn hadn't needed to touch him to kill him. We didn't stop running until our lungs felt like they were bleeding. The jungle closed in around us, tighter, suffocating, like it was pushing us somewhere deeper. There was no way out, no sign of the coast, no landmarks to navigate by, just an endless maze of trees and darkness. Oh shit, Foster gasped, doubling over, hands on his knees. What the hell was that? A trap, Morales snapped. His hands were shaking as he reloaded his rifle. They're pushing us where they want us. And where the hell is that? I swallowed hard. The breeding ground. They weren't trying to kill us all at once. They wanted us to suffer. Then a noise cut through the silence. Not a roar, not a growl. Laughter. Soft. Almost human. Then, in a slow, mocking whisper, run. The voice wasn't ours. And it wasn't coming from behind us. It was coming from all around. The unicorns weren't just hunters. They were intelligent, and they were enjoying this. We didn't wait. We ran. I wasn't sure how much longer my legs could hold, but stopping wasn't an option. The jungle was alive with something unseen. The laughter faded, but the feeling remained, like fingers trailing just behind my neck, something breathing down my spine. Morales led the way, carving through the undergrowth, his rifle scanning every shadow. Foster kept pace behind me, muttering something angry under his breath, his grip on his weapon unsteady. He was breaking. We all were. Then the ground shifted, not in a natural way, not in an earthquake way. 1 second, it was solid beneath our boots. The next, it was just gone. Morales disappeared first, vanishing into the earth with a shout. Foster and I had no time to react before the ground collapsed under us, plunging us into darkness. I hit something hard, my shoulder cracking against stone. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs, and for a second, all I could do was lie there, gasping, my brain struggling to catch up. Then, dripping, slow, rhythmic, I pushed myself up, blinking through the dark. My gear was intact. My gun was still strapped to my back. But the air was different down here. It was heavier, thicker. Foster groaned nearby. Morales was already up, sweeping the area with his flashlight. We weren't in the jungle anymore. We were in a cavern. And the walls, they weren't just stone. They were carved. Symbols. Strange. Ancient. Worn away by time but still there. My stomach twisted. This isn't natural. Morales nodded, his face unreadable. This was built. Foster turned in a slow circle, light shaking in his hands. Built by who? Then he froze. His flashlight beam landed on something ahead. Something big. Something moving. We weren't alone down here. The thing in the dark shifted, its massive form just out of reach of the light. But I saw enough. A unicorn. Bigger than the ones we'd seen before. Its body covered in scars. Its horn jagged like a broken blade. But the worst part, it was staring right at us. No rage. No surprise. Just amusement. Then the walls breathed. The air itself moved. And I realized, we weren't in a cavern. We were in a nest. Dozens of them. Lurking in the shadows. Barely visible. Their bodies shifting like ghosts. The breeding ground wasn't just a place. It was a trap. Foster made a sound. Half a breath, half a sob. His hands were shaking so bad I thought he might drop his gun. The biggest unicorn, the alpha, took a step forward. Not charging, not attacking. It was testing us. It already knew the answer. Get ready, Morales whispered, tightening his grip on his rifle. I slowly reached for my weapon. Foster didn't. Instead, he ran. Straight into the dark. Straight into them. The unicorns didn't hesitate. They moved as one, a blur of bodies and blades. Foster didn't even have time to scream. And then, silence. The alpha turned back toward us, black eyes gleaming. It was our turn. Foster was gone, ripped apart. No time to think about it. No time to mourn. The unicorns didn't move right away. They stood in the darkness, waiting for us to make a mistake. The alpha stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Its horn was jagged, twisted, made for killing. Black eyes locked onto us, showing no fear, no hesitation, just cold, calculated hunger. Morales moved first, raising his rifle, but the unicorn was faster. A white blur, then a flash of bone. Morales barely ducked in time as the horn slashed through the air where his head had been. The wall behind him split open from the force. Oh no, they weren't just fast. They were strong, too strong. The alpha twisted, coming for me next. I fired on instinct, the bullets slamming into its hide. But they did nothing. The rounds flattened against its skin like I'd just shot at a tank. The thing grinned. It was playing with us. We had to move. We had to get the hell out of there. I grabbed Morales, yanking him back as the unicorn lunged again. We bolted, tearing through the cavern, weaving between massive stone pillars covered in ancient carvings. The walls felt wrong, like they were shifting, alive. The whole place smelled like blood and decay. We weren't the first ones to be trapped down here, and if we didn't get out fast, we'd end up like the rest. A tunnel opened ahead, a narrow passage, barely wide enough to fit through. We didn't slow down, we ran straight for it. The unicorns followed. The sound of hooves slamming against stone roared behind us. Fast, too fast. They were closing in. I risked a glance back and saw them. A blur of white, shadows twisting around them, eyes locked on us like we were nothing more than prey. Move! Morales shoved me forward. We dove into the tunnel just as the alpha struck. Its horn slammed into the entrance, shattering rock, missing me by inches. We scrambled through the narrow passage, barely escaping. The unicorns didn't follow. They couldn't. The tunnel was too tight for them to fit. We'd bought ourselves a few seconds, but only seconds. The tunnel was dark, damp, and too quiet. The sound of the unicorns pacing outside sent chills down my spine. They weren't leaving. They were waiting. Morales was breathing hard, gripping his rifle so tight his knuckles were white. He looked shaken. We both were. What the hell are these things? He muttered. I didn't have an answer. Nothing about this made sense. The carvings on the walls, the way the unicorns toyed with us instead of just killing us outright. This wasn't just an animal lair. This was something older, something worse. We followed the tunnel deeper, moving slow, careful. The ground sloped downward, leading us somewhere. Then the passage opened up, and we saw everything. A massive cavern stretched out before us, lit by an eerie blue glow coming from cracks in the rock. But it wasn't the light that stopped us. It was the bones. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Human, piled in massive heaps. Skulls stacked neatly along the walls. Some were old, brittle, turned to dust. Others were fresh. This wasn't a hunting ground. This was a feeding pit. And in the center of it all stood something else. Bigger than the alpha. Older. Different. A unicorn. But wrong. Its body was scarred. Its horn longer. Sharper. Its eyes weren't just black. They were hollow. Like it had seen centuries of death and come out the other side unchanged. It turned its head toward us. Slow. Deliberate. And it spoke. Not in words. Not in sound. In thought. Inside my head, a voice that was not my own whispered, "You were never meant to leave." Morales raised his rifle. The unicorn just smiled. Morales fired first. A full auto burst straight into the thing's skull. The bullets hit. The bullets did nothing. They flattened, crumpling like they'd been fired into solid steel. The unicorn didn't flinch, didn't react. It just watched. I felt it inside my head, picking through my thoughts like pages in a book. It was playing with us. I grabbed Morales and yanked him back. "We have to move." He didn't hear me. He was locked onto the thing, finger still on the trigger, still firing even though it wasn't working. His breathing was wrong, fast, panicked. The unicorn took a slow step forward. That's all it took. Morales screamed, not in pain, in fear. His body twisted, his arms locking up. Blood leaked from his nose, his ears. I saw his eyes change, his pupils blown out, his face contorted in some kind of silent agony. I knew what was happening. It was inside him. I acted before I could think. I grabbed the last grenade on Morales' vest, yanked the pin, and shoved him backward, straight at the unicorn. The explosion ripped through the cavern. The blast wave knocked me off my feet, heat and dust tearing past me. The sound was deafening, a brutal, violent roar that made the air itself feel like it was screaming. Then, silence. I coughed, pushing myself up. The cavern was wrecked. Smoke filled the air, dust raining from the ceiling. Morales was gone. So was the unicorn. I didn't stay to check if it was dead. I didn't care. I ran, straight through the cavern, past the bones, past the bodies, past everything. The tunnels blurred together. I didn't stop. Not until I saw it. A way out. Moonlight. A break in the rock. I clawed my way through. Lungs burning. Body screaming. And then, I was outside. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I ran until the jungle broke. Until I saw the coast. Until I saw what was left of our wrecked chopper. And by some miracle, the radio still worked. I called for extraction. I gave my coordinates. And I waited. And for the first time since this nightmare started, nothing came for me. They found me at dawn. A Black Ops recovery team. No insignias. No questions. They loaded me onto a chopper, gave me water, checked for wounds. But they didn't ask what happened because they already knew. Hours later, back on a classified naval ship, a man in a suit sat across from me. Cold eyes. No name. No emotion. "You did well," he said. "Mission complete." I stared at him, barely able to process the words. Complete? Everyone else is dead. He didn't blink. It was expected. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You knew." "We knew it was a risk," he corrected. I let out a bitter laugh. "They're not just animals." "No," the man agreed. "They're not." I leaned forward. "What are they?" The man smiled. But it wasn't amusement. It was finality. Something that should have never existed. I thought about the cavern, the bones, the voices in my head. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Is it over?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he slid a new file across the table. A new set of coordinates. A new mission. I wish I didn't ask that question. How I killed 3 unicorns in one day. I was promised $500,000 per horn. That was enough to make any sane man hesitate. Not because of the payday, but because of the prey. These weren't fairy tale creatures. They weren't white, sparkling, or gentle. The things I hunted were apex predators, ancient beasts carved from the nightmares of evolution. Their bones were unbreakable, their blood was black as oil, and their horns could puncture tank armor. I'd seen what they could do, watched a whole squad of armed mercenaries get torn apart in under a minute. This wasn't a hunt, this was war, and I was going in alone. The client, some faceless high-ranking suit, didn't care how I did it, only that I brought back proof. 3 horns, 3 kills, one day. It sounded impossible. Maybe it was. But I didn't come all this way to turn back now. I moved fast, boots pressing into damp soil as I pushed deeper into the jungle. This place didn't have a name on any map, just coordinates and warnings scribbled in blood by those who came before me. The first unicorn was out here, hidden among the trees. The ghost stalker, they called it. A perfect predator, capable of vanishing into the environment like a chameleon. Thermal scopes were useless. Motion sensors, dead on arrival. This thing could stand 5 feet in front of you, and you wouldn't even know it until your insides were spilling onto the ground. I gripped my rifle tighter, eyes scanning the trees, the shadows, the unnatural silence. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and then it moved. A flicker, barely a ripple against the leaves. I fired on instinct, my modified M99 anti-material rifle, roaring like thunder. The bullet tore through the air, straight into nothing. The jungle swallowed the sound, the echo fading, and then I felt it, a breath on my neck, cold, slow, hungry. I spun, blade in hand, but it was too late. Something slammed into me, fast and heavy, knocking the wind from my lungs. I hit the ground hard, my gun lost in the dirt. The ghost stalker was here, and I was already losing. The second I hit the ground, I rolled. A second later, the thing's horn punched straight into the soil where my chest had been. That was all the time I had. I reached for the pistol on my hip and fired 3 times. Center mass. The bullets sparked off its skin like they'd hit steel. No effect. Its eyes, black pits of swirling death, locked onto me, and I swore I saw it grin. It moved again, faster than something that size should. I barely ducked in time as its jagged horn sliced through the air, close enough that I felt the heat of it. No more running, no more wasting bullets. I drew my combat knife, a foot-long serrated, coated in a neurotoxin designed to paralyze anything with a pulse. The unicorn's breathing slowed, a warning growl rolling from its throat. It knew. It understood weapons. These things weren't animals. They were something else, something worse. It lunged. I dodged left, slamming my knife upward. The blade sank just beneath its ribs, twisting deep. A scream ripped from its throat, more rage than pain. Its body flickered, blending into the jungle again. But this time, I had it. I didn't let go. My free hand grabbed the base of its horn, locking me in place. The world blurred as it bucked, trying to shake me off. But I held on, driving the knife deeper, twisting, wrenching. Hot, thick blood poured over my hand. With one final brutal motion, I ripped the blade across its chest. The flickering stopped, the illusion shattered, the unicorn staggered, eyes wide, mouth foaming, as its legs failed beneath it. A final breath left its body, a sound more human than I expected. Then, silence. I pried my knife free and stood, panting, covered in its blood. The first one was dead. One down, two more to go. I bent down, gripping its horn with both hands, and yanked it free with a sickening crack. The jungle around me seemed to watch, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Something else was coming, and this time, I wouldn't be the one hunting. I didn't waste time admiring the kill. The second unicorn was out there, and it wasn't going to give me a damn second to breathe. The Phantom Striker, that was the name whispered in hushed voices by those unlucky enough to have seen it and lived. If the first one had been a ghost, this one was a storm, a blur of muscle and death moving faster than the human eye could track. Reports said it could run through gunfire, dodge bullets like they were moving in slow motion. Some claimed it didn't run at all, that it simply appeared, its razor-sharp horn already inside you before you even knew you were dead. I didn't plan on finding out firsthand if the rumors were true. I moved quick, deeper into the jungle, staying low, using the trees as cover. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. The air felt different now, charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. My instincts screamed at me, but there was nothing to see, just silence. Too much silence. My gut clenched. That's when I heard it, a sound like splitting air. I threw myself sideways, just as something tore through the space I'd been standing in. A blur so fast it barely existed. Shit. I rolled, gun up, tracking nothing but empty jungle. The thing had vanished. Then, another sound. This time, from behind me. I didn't think, I just dropped, and something ripped past my skull, close enough that I felt the heat of its movement. It was playing with me. I wasn't hunting it. It was hunting me. I needed to change that, fast. I pulled a small EMP charge from my vest, clicking the timer to a 1-second delay. If this thing moved as fast as they said, I needed it to stop. I armed the charge and threw it straight into the air. Wait for it. The jungle shook as the unicorn came for me again, a thunderous blur of raw speed. Now, the charge exploded midair, sending out a pulse of electromagnetic interference. It wasn't made to kill. It was made to disrupt. The unicorn stumbled, just for a second, just enough for me to see it. A silver blur catching itself mid-movement, its momentum thrown off. That was my shot. I raised my rifle, breathed, fired. The first round clipped its side. The second missed. The third slammed into its leg, and the beast roared, its movement faltering. That was all I needed. I was on it in an instant, blade out, no hesitation. One deep, brutal stab straight into its throat. The struggle lasted all of 5 seconds. Then it was still. 2 down, 1 to go. I yanked my knife free, black blood hissing against the blade. My arms ached. My breath was ragged, but I didn't stop moving. I snapped off the Phantom Striker's horn and stuffed it into my pack. That's when I felt it, a pressure, a slow creeping feeling slithering into my skull. The last one knew I was coming. The Mind Shredder, that was what they called it. This unicorn didn't just fight, it saw things, knew things. Some said it could crawl into your head, make you doubt what was real. Others claimed it didn't have to touch you to kill you. It just had to think hard enough. I gritted my teeth, forced myself forward, through thick vines and tangled roots. The jungle had changed. It felt alive, but not in a natural way. The trees leaned in. Shadows stretched where they shouldn't. It was already inside my head. Then I heard my own voice. "You're going the wrong way." I froze. The voice had come from right behind me, but that was impossible. I turned, weapon raised, and stared at myself, a perfect copy, standing 10 feet away, grinning. "This isn't your hunt anymore," it said. "It's mine." The Mind Shredder had already begun. I didn't hesitate. I raised my rifle and fired straight into my own face. The bullet tore through the illusion, but there was no blood, no impact, just a ripple in the air, like I'd shot at smoke. The copy of me laughed, the sound crawling under my skin. "That won't work," it said, tilting its head. "You already know that." I kept my breathing steady, adjusting my grip on the rifle. This wasn't like the others. The Ghost Stalker had been a shadow in the trees. The Phantom Striker a storm of speed. But this one was inside me. The jungle around me seemed to warp, the trees bending at unnatural angles, the ground tilting like I was standing on the edge of a nightmare. I took a step forward, and my foot sank, not into mud, but into nothing, a black void that shouldn't exist. I yanked it back just in time. The illusion was getting stronger. I needed to find the real unicorn before it drowned me in my own mind. I closed my eyes for half a second, then opened them again. The jungle had changed. The trees were gone. The sky was red, the ground black and cracked like old stone. And in front of me, standing in the middle of this twisted world, was it, the Mind Shredder. It was bigger than the others, its body sleek and unnatural, as if it wasn't made of flesh but something deeper, something wrong. Its horn wasn't a single spiral like the others. It was fractured, splintered, and its eyes? They weren't eyes at all, just swirling pits of endless shifting colors. "You don't belong here," it whispered, but the voice wasn't coming from its mouth. It was inside my skull, crawling like insects behind my eyes. "Drop your weapon, kneel." I felt my muscles twitch. My fingers loosened on the rifle. My knees buckled. "No." I clenched my jaw, forcing the resistance, pushing back against its hold. This thing was strong, but I wasn't weak. I tightened my grip on the rifle, inhaled sharply, and did the only thing that made sense. I charged. The second I moved, the Mind Shredder reacted, not with speed, not with force, with thought. The world fractured. 1 second, I was running forward. The next, I was somewhere else. A house. Familiar, too familiar. I knew this place. I'd grown up here. The floorboards creaked under my boots. The air smelled like dust and something rotten. No, this wasn't real. I knew that. I knew that. Then I heard a voice. "Son." I turned, and my father was standing there, dead for 15 years. His face was the same as I remembered. Worn, lined, tired. He looked at me like he always had, like I was a stranger even in my own home. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Why are you hunting them?" "You're not real," I said, gripping my rifle. "None of this is real." He stepped closer. "Then why are you sweating?" "I wasn't. I was." "Shut up," I growled. The walls shook. The illusion cracked at the edges, flickering like a dying screen. The Mind Shredder was slipping. I focused on that, forced the pieces apart. This wasn't my house. My father was dead. This was just another trap. I raised the rifle, aimed not at him, but at the space behind him. The illusion shattered. The jungle snapped back into focus, the Mind Shredder staggering as if I'd just driven a knife into its skull. Its psychic hold was breaking. I didn't wait. I raised my weapon and fired point blank. The bullet tore through its head. For a second, it didn't react. Then, slowly, it collapsed. I stood over the body, breathing hard. The third one was dead. 3 kills. One day, I yanked my knife free, wiped the black blood on my sleeve, and snapped off the final horn with a brutal twist. The jungle was silent. The hunt was over. I took one last look at the carnage around me, the remains of creatures that were never meant to be prey. Then I turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees with 3 horns and a payday worth killing for. Somewhere, deep in the jungle, something else was watching. But that was someone else's problem. I was done with my money.